I had a comedian on here, Ali Sadiq, from Houston. He did like 10 years in the feds. And he talked about a situation where one of the guards that didn't like him made him strip search like in front of everybody. And that to him was like the thing he hated the most. Like he just did not want that situation to happen. And when it happened, he basically made plans to kill the prison guard. And it got to the point where he was getting ready to stab him, and then a bunch of his guys like took him aside and said, listen, don't do this. And then the prison guard kind of caught wind, he transferred out, and that was the end of that. But, the way he described it, he had stabbed other people. He talked about a whole stabbing incident where a guy made a gay joke and he stabbed him in the shower. So he seemed like he was dead serious about this. How often have you seen inmates attack prison guards with a knife?
Often, Vlad. Often.
You actually saw it?
In a 16-year career, yes.
How many times have you seen this personally?
Once directly involved, right? Other than that, responding. So you got blood on the ground, you got stabbed people, and you got down inmates. But I don't know if I shared it the last time. Not only was the inmate stabbing the officer, the inmate tied the knife to his hand using bed sheets.
Yeah, you talked about
so he
this,
couldn't
yeah.
drop it. They do not need a reason to stab an officer. They do not care about the repercussions. As a matter of fact, the one I was involved in, he told us, oh yeah, I wanted the cops to shoot us. I wanted the control booth to shoot me and kill me. So some people just might be suicidal and want suicide by cop.
I mean, he wasn't suicidal.
I can totally understand that dude's,
Yeah.
I can totally understand him wanting to stab and kill a correctional officer for making him strip out, or for him perceiving that he was being belittled, because in prison, inmates don't have much. What they do have is their dignity, their honor, and their word. If you violate any of those, then that's all they got.
I mean, do you see prison guards doing that type of stuff? Like, listen, I just don't like this guy. I'm going to embarrass him in front of everybody.
Utilizing other techniques, yes. Yes. Making an example, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But when you said he made him strip out in front of everybody, conduct an unclothed body search, we have done that in emergency situations. Everybody strip out right now. But I guess what you're saying
he
is
just
a little
pointed him
different.
out by himself.
Yeah, that's not good, man. That's common sense. You don't want to do that. That's all bad.
All right, so that prison guard knew what he was doing.
100%.
I had interviewed Ali Zoe Adam. He was one of the founders of the Zoe Pound from Miami. And he talked about a situation. He got into a prison fight and he threw hot oil on the prisoner during the fight. Have you seen this type of thing?
It is nasty. Not only do they throw hot oil, but they get hot pots, which is basically, a water boiler, a kettle, electric, and they will mix water with baby oil so it's nasty, and then they'll throw it on somebody. I've seen that numerous times where the victim will come in and he's discolored because of the skin came off all on his face, and that looks extremely painful, not to mention the blisters after. To me, that's attempted murder.
Yeah? What happens to people that do that? Is that an attempted murder charge? Or
Yeah, it's attempted murder, because they usually follow up with hitting him over the head with the hot pot, creating a weapon, and or pulling out a knife and stabbing him. It's just and then the officers come and pepper spray. So imagine being hot-boiled water with oil, stabbed, and then pepper sprayed. That's a bad combination. And
that's the worst day of your life, pretty much.
It happens often.
Happens often.
When I say often, I mean it's not abnormal.
I mean, when you look at people who are locked up, how many of those are mentally disabled to a certain degree? Not fully retarded, but like people that are in special ed classes, can't read, can't write. For example, R. Kelly can't read and write, right? I mean, he's a musical genius. I get it. But he's probably borderline retarded. You know what I'm saying? He's just probably autistic, and just is so good musically that has overcome all of his other deficiencies. But now he's in prison and he can't read and write. How many people in prison do you think are like that?
Uneducated or like mental illness?
I mean, when I say mental illness, I mean like learning deficiencies and so forth.
Developmental disability is what we
Yes.
call it. We call
Right.
it developmental
There you go.
disability. Usually, as a result, how many? I don't know. If you have 100%, probably 30%.
That's a lot.
I mean, yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, look, I interviewed this guy, Lil Woody. He was one of the, essentially the star witness in the Young Thug YSL RICO case. And I remember talking to him, and I didn't know his whole story, but he talked about how when he was a kid, he like fell down the stairs and
Right.
went into a coma,
Right.
woke up like 6 months later, had to learn to walk and talk and so forth. And then by that time, he was put in special ed classes. And then, I think he dropped out of school. And then, now you got this guy who has no education, who has a learning disability. You give him some guns, you give him some drugs, you give him some jewelry, some liquor. And next thing you know, he's out shooting everybody and so forth. So does this happen a lot, this kind of situation?
Not 30%, 20%, 30%. But
That's
I will
still a
tell you,
lot.
I will tell you a file that I read of an inmate that I came across
Okay.
who was developmental disabled. He was an Asian youngster, probably 22, 23 years old, on an SNY yard, level 4 EOP, Donovan. I read his file. What is this guy in prison for? He was walking down the street in a neighborhood. There was a mute or deaf person sitting in a wheelchair on their driveway, just hanging out casually. That suspect pushed the victim over, I believe it was a male, and raped the victim in the wheelchair on the driveway where the person couldn't even yell for help, and then took off running. That's why that developmental disabled inmate was in prison for. So do I feel sorry or bad for him because they're, you use the word retarded or slow? Oh, I don't know, man. That doesn't fly in my book to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a term called JCAT.
Well, JCAT would be mentally disabled.
Right. On medication.
Now,
and
that
so
is
forth.
about 50 to 60%.
50 to 60% of inmates are JCATs.
I want you to look at downtown Skid Row and downtown San Diego, which we are seeing out here in the streets is happening in prison. Maybe 50%. A high 45%.
Wow.
If you're asking me how many more solid gangsters are there, far and few between, man. They're the last of a dying breed.
Okay, so what percentage of inmates are totally lucid, intelligent people that if you put them back out in the world, if they change their ways, they can make a good living for themselves and go on and live a fruitful life?
I don't think intelligence has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with willingness to change. Willingness to change. Have you had enough?
Right, but some people, look, if you are mentally disabled,
Yeah.
you're not going to make it on the outside.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
You don't really have a chance.
Correct.
Now, if you were raised in a crime environment, this is all you know, and you could change. You
Yeah,
could be
I would say-
exposed to new experiences, new people, realize there's a better way to do it. Hey, listen, it's better to have a job at McDonald's than to go back to prison.
If 60% of the inmates actually got their shit together, they would be able to thrive out here in society.
But the other
The other
40%,
that's a wrap.
no chance.
Fuck no.
So they're basically where they're supposed to be.
There's some fucking evil monsters, and yeah, absolutely.